Welcome to a special edition of Global One Media's Crypto Chronicles. Today, I'm welcoming Richard Short and Lyriq Bent. Richard is the writer and producer of the upcoming movie Titi, which is inspired by Shakespeare's play Titus Andronicus. Lyriq will be playing the leading role in this movie as Titi. The movie will be produced in collaboration with Mogul Productions, a platform that leverages the blockchain technology for voting, film financing, rewards, and distribution, and engages financial backers and audiences throughout the script-to-screen process, enabling what is called Film3. Gentlemen, it's so exciting to have you both with us on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Exciting to be here.
You're quite welcome. So I've been reading about the movie and I can't wait to watch it. The main premise is that revenge is a dish better left unserved. So I'm going to start with you, Richard. Titus Andronicus is one of Shakespeare's most controversial and perhaps deranged works, as some might say. So what inspired you to choose this play in particular to modernize it into the film Titi?
Yeah, well, firstly, William Shakespeare inspired me to write this because he's the best writer or screenwriter there ever was. It's much maligned. It's rarely done. And there was also a book called The Great White Bard by Farah Karim Cooper I'd recently read, highlighting the issue of race in William Shakespeare, in all his plays, which really fascinated me and got my mind racing. Lyriq and I had spoken with each other about potentially teaming up on a project, a Shakespeare project, because I think he'd be fantastic. We'd discussed the obvious character, which is Othello, and this one to us became far more challenging, rewarding, tricky, but in the very best way. So he then asked me not to make it specifically about race, which I totally understand. Alas, when people see Lyriq playing Titi, they can't, their own prejudice, the prejudice of the planet, will right away add race as a layer into this story. So we set it in a fictional West African country. And that's sort of where we start. There are no racial divides, but there are tribal conflicts and political conflicts.
So it's inspired by Shakespeare, and you're addressing some of the issues that were already in the play, which is really good. But I would argue that the play was written more than 4 centuries ago, so the context was quite different. So what were some of the biggest challenges in adapting such a controversial and complex play for modern audiences?
Sure. Well, the first challenge with adapting Titus Andronicus is actually that it has extremely lengthy scenes. Some of the scenes run, the entire Act 1 runs like a movie in itself. It could be a 2-hour one scene, which of course doesn't work for a modern audience, doesn't work on film. So cutting that down. The rapping, we have rapping. Titi is a rap star, musical mogul. And that was easy because there's a musicality to the Shakespeare's language, and Titus Andronicus is, of course, written in verse. So that lends itself right away, the 10 beats to the bar and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say cuts were the most challenging, and of course, finding a way to resonate the themes with a modern audience.
Which is really interesting, and I can't wait to watch how you've managed to do all of this. I want to move to you, Lyriq, now. I loved your performance in Acrimony, but this is a different role. The movie argues against revenge and that it does not help you heal your wounds. So how will you prepare to show that in Titi's character through spoken words and body language?
Well, I think the first thing is understanding that this is a humanistic story, and it's about feelings and emotions, and I think that's a universal understanding. And so the first approach is to talk about the person and what that person is experiencing. We all have our experiences, and we get to shine a light on Titi and what he's experiencing, which then will help us understand his actions. And so for me, talking with Richard is making sure that I understand truly the story that we're telling and what it is that we want people to understand about these characters, Titi in particular. And in doing so, I believe that the audience can then put themselves in the shoe of Titi and have a better understanding of his actions throughout the story.
Yeah, and so they can also empathize and go through exactly the experiences vicariously uh,
Right.
themselves. And Richard, you mentioned wanting to tweak the perspective on Titus Andronicus, and you mentioned the race issue, which is one of the elements there. But can you elaborate on how TT reinterprets the character and his actions?
Yes, I mean, without giving too much away, I wanted to somehow justify the violent actions that Titi does, because Titus does some very violent things in the movie, in the play. Perhaps his actions can be excused or at least understood if circumstances are taken into consideration. And so that's the definition of empathy, as you just said, right?
Mm.
It is a man that carries with him a very heavy burden of guilt. In the past, he's been hideously mistreated by colonial rulers in West Africa before our film even begins. He's carried that his whole life. And no matter how much he climbs up the social ladder in Gaboria, our fictional country in which it's set, he'll always be beholden to that past. There's no shaking it off. He can't erase the color of his skin, or even in West Africa, being a black man means facing a rigged system, I would imagine. And that's kind of what we're trying to portray. No matter how successful Titi becomes, he's always facing a tough choice.
Which is why we were being very mindful not to make it about race, because that will kind of happen on its own without us trying to beat that over the head. And in a way, and this is a creative choice that I've made, music is his therapy. Music is his way of keeping him as sane as one could be from all that trauma. And in today's landscape, we can appreciate and readily accept the understanding of trauma, PTSD, and what one goes through when experiencing these things. And so music is one of those elements of therapy. And there's other things that I don't want to give away that Richard has brilliantly placed in the film to kind of allow the audience, give the audience permission to understand the character and why certain behaviors, and then seeing it and seeing what trauma can do, and seeing and understanding what PTSD is all about through the storytelling, and thus making the audience have more sympathy towards Titi and seeing the tragedy, if you will, of it all, and where they might, as audience, be responsible for some of his trauma and tragedy.
I couldn't agree more. Most of us, if not all, are shaped by our past traumas, if you will. So it's unavoidable, and you really cannot separate a person from their past. For sure. And as Richard mentioned, there are some violent scenes, there are some appalling actions taking place, even committed by Titi himself. So, how do you intend to reconcile those two aspects? I mean, the violence and showing that vengeance isn't really the best option. How do you intend to reconcile those two aspects in your performance?
Well, in order to reconcile those actions, we have to again understand the mindset of the character, um, not necessarily the mindset of the writer, but the characters, so that the audience can understand and follow their own journey. We want the audience to kind of superimpose themselves in Titi's story, in his situation, and understanding what they would do. I don't want the audience to be on the outside judging Titi. I want them to immerse themselves into Titi's actual experiences and have them say to themselves, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. Oh, he could have done this. Why wouldn't he do that? And then hopefully, while trying to connect all of those dots, realizing that the game is rigged. He has choices, but those choices only lead to certain places because we never not have a choice. We always have a choice. But when you choose from the choices that are given, it only takes you to certain places. And those who are playing the game understand that. And so TT ends up where he ends up. And hopefully the audience can see and understand that about their own world and their own lives, and understand that in order to get to the outcome, that sometimes you got to see and understand the game is rigged, so that your choices can take you to where you want to go and not where it's just going to place you because it's decision premeditated for you. So so that's the hope. That's the hope that will help, carry the weight of the actions and not have it just be the actions, but actually have it married to the psyche of the audience, so that there's a greater appreciation, understanding of what we're trying to do with telling the story.
Yeah, for sure. And in a way, Titi did go through a lot, so, or does go through a lot. So it's kind of hard to judge him. Uh, but still, we choose our response, as you said, which brings me to my next question, Richard. How do you believe people and communities who have been at war for years today, we're seeing this happening in many places, how do you believe people and communities can break the cycle of violence and perhaps live in coexist?
Firstly, if I could answer that question, I'd be running the United Nations and the planet. um, there's choices, as we're just discussing. Everyone has a choice. Obviously, I can't claim to offer a way out of a cycle of violence through the film of Titi. That's not possible, other than to highlight the pain and the trauma that such bloodshed causes. For instance, do you remember the movie Trainspotting by Danny Boyle in the 90s with Ewan McGregor? It was all about taking drugs, and it was in Scotland. And I remember that film was maligned at the time. Somebody in the press said it glamorizes heroin use, drug addiction. And the director, Danny Boyle, said, have you seen the film? It does anything but. It shows you the suffering, of being addicted to such sort of, to heroin or something. And this shows you the suffering when the choice is made to pick up a gun. And I think the real choice should be to do exactly the opposite, of course.
Yeah, I completely understand in that often artists try to focus on something in order to deliver the opposite message rather than glorify, as you mentioned, violence or heroin use or any of those for that matter. And Lyriq, I want to ask you, in the movie, Titi is many things. He used to be a feared general, but then he moved to music. But then the circumstances forced him to go back into war. So he kind of transitioned from war to art and then back from art to war. Do you believe art and war have parallels, or are they opposites? And how do you capture the breadth of the character in the movie?
Well, in a way, this is the art of war, and by that I mean we try our best to not glorify the violence. It's there, it's present. We don't need to add to it. And so we show the music element, therapy element of Titi's journey, of Titi's experience, to show you that, to give the audience an opportunity to imagine what he has gone through, had gone through, and music now being his forte. and that's by choice. That like we consciously decided to do that, and once we did, it felt right. It felt proper, and so we try to expand on the music element, on the art element, and when the war, the politic element shows itself, dragging him back into something that he naturally is able to take on. We don't show things. We suggest what's happening. Things are said, but we don't show it because we don't want this to be a torture porn, or we don't want this to be a test. So we want this to be a modernized version of good storytelling. And we noticed that there were things that were missing that we felt that we can bring into a day version of this. And so that's what we're attempting to do. That's what we've done so far. And so the next step is to show that on the large screen and for the audience to walk away with what we intend, which is to show them something, that's beautiful in a tragic way.
I think that's exactly right. If I could just add to what Lyriq's saying, or highlight what he's saying, we're showing the effects of violence and the effects of violent choices. We're certainly not condoning them. We're just illustrating what those choices would lead to.
It is a powerful message. And my last question is to you, Richard. How can viewers get involved and stay up to date with this movie and its development?
Well, they could follow Mogul Productions on X, Twitter, whichever. They could keep an eye on their community Telegram to keep up to date with everything. Check out the project; all the updates will be on there. And I think you can also check out where the project's at and its status on mogulproductions.com as well. I think that's right, Lyriq, right? I think you can, if you keep checking in on there and stay engaged with the conversation, then you'll be first to know all the
that's a good place. The social media platforms for Mogul Productions is a great place to find out what's going on. And it's also a great place for you to have your opinions said, because we're interested in hearing what people have to say about what we're doing. We'll be exposing the audience to little nuggets as we continue to develop the project and get some feedback so that we can really, create something that people want to see.
Very exciting, and I can't wait to watch it. Richard Short and Lyriq Bent, it's been a pleasure talking to you both today. Thank you so much for sharing all of those insights with us today. And I'm really looking forward to watch the movie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, William.